Joining us now from Washington, D.C. is Alabama Representative Mo Brooks. Congressman, I appreciate you coming on tonight. So we saw yesterday, for example, the White House kind of wrap up its defense. Today, there's questions and answers, that kind of format that's going on right now. What's been your response so far to what you've seen in the Senate impeachment trial?
Well, to me, it's still a waste of time. We've got some major issues that are facing our country on deficit and debt, on border security, on this battle between free enterprise and socialism, Iran, North Korea, dozens of other issues that we should be addressing. But instead, America's focused on an impeachment proceeding that's not going to go anyplace, and that has, in my judgment at least, no legal factual basis for prosecution. So what have we been at it now for 4 or 5 months? Nothing to show for it. Give it another month or two, nothing to show for it, except that we've not been doing our jobs in Washington, rising to the challenges that America faces.
And I want to get to those other legislative efforts in just a moment, but before, really quick, do you support bringing in any additional witnesses in this process so far, or do you think this would just kind of elongate the process that you already don't support?
Well, in the House of Representatives, we had 17 Democrat witnesses, and the Democrats didn't allow a single Republican witness. I would have loved to have had in the House proceedings Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, the so-called whistleblower, who I refer to as the Democrat spy, perhaps others. Unfortunately, the Democrats in the House did not allow any of those people to testify. So in that vein, I believe some of those people ought to be called as witnesses in the United States Senate, so that the American people can have a better understanding as to the political scam that this is, whereby the Democrats have been using taxpayer dollars to engage in opposition research to try to assist them with the 2020 elections. Notwithstanding that, I'll defer to my brethren in the United States Senate how best to handle the witness issue.
And you spoke about legislative efforts that you'd like to see get done. For example, we saw the USMCA kind of be pushed down the road a little bit before the political pressure was too much. They eventually did pass the House and the Senate. It, of course, got signed into law today by President Trump. What else would you like to see kind of be done in a legislative effort before the upcoming election?
We have a horrible situation on our southern border. Over 2,000 Americans are dead each year, dead on American soil, victims of homicides committed by illegal aliens. We're not doing anything about that. You've got another 30,000 Americans who are dead each year because of overdoses from heroin and cocaine, roughly 90% of which is smuggled across our porous southern border. Nothing's being done about that. Those two numbers alone are shocking. Those two numbers alone in just 2 years constitute more lives lost than what we lost in the entire Vietnam War. So there are major issues of that nature. You've got the Congressional Budget Office that has just recently released a report that suggests we're going to have a $1 trillion deficit this year, that we're looking at an indefinite period of $1 trillion deficits. We're being told that these deficits, our financial circumstances are unsustainable, which is accounting language for we're going to have a national insolvency and bankruptcy if we don't start acting better. Nonetheless, that's not being addressed either. No one's paying any attention to it because the impeachment effort by the Democrats is sucking up all the oxygen in Washington, D.C. And so there are a lot of major challenges that we're facing as a country that are being left unaddressed because attention is focused elsewhere, and that's bad and it's dangerous.
And to that point, too, actually, next week, the fentanyl classification expires, and that's something that is ravaging the country right now. I mean, back in, I think it was 2018, 75,000 deaths. That number did drop a little bit last year, but by no means are we out of the woods when it comes to that issue as well. So you just kind of laid out a lot of the domestic problems that are really concerning Americans right now. And, I mean, at least when it comes to polls, Americans aren't really too concerned about impeachment at the very moment. There's other things on the plate that they would rather like to see get done. And meanwhile, this comes at a time, too, where there are some foreign policy issues going on. I mean, it wasn't too long ago where Iran was the big story. I mean, we saw over the weekend where a rocket strike hit the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. There seems to be more tensions in the Middle East right now. What would you like to see this administration do in regard to Iran moving forward?
Well, with respect to the Middle East, I'm one of those that believes that that's a very difficult entanglement. We should not be in Syria, in my judgment. We should not be in Iraq, in my judgment. And we would not be in either of them, in my judgment, but for Barack Obama's administration engaging in a regime change strategy in Syria that failed miserably. It was the same kind of strategy that the Obama administration successfully used in Libya, successfully to the extent that Muammar Gaddafi was toppled, unsuccessful to the extent that now you have chaos in Libya, you have the loss of 4 American citizens in Benghazi. We need to quit meddling in so many other nations' internal affairs. In my judgment, in Iraq, in Syria, in Afghanistan, the sacrifices of American lives and treasury are not appreciated by the people who live there like they should be. And if they're not going to appreciate our loss of life, if they're not going to appreciate the money that we spend as we try to bring about peace and give them the kind of liberties and freedoms that we enjoy in the United States of America, well, let's not be there. It's one thing to be a liberating force. It's another thing to become an occupational force. And to a certain degree, we've become an occupational force.
Yeah, and you brought up the deficit before. A lot of that money going overseas to those expensive wars, whether it be in Afghanistan, Iraq, or the operation in Syria right now. A lot of Americans right now saying they'd rather see that money spent right here at home. But Congressman Brooks, I really appreciate you coming on tonight. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.